Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengal podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Solomon Wilcots, and we're joined by our Cincinnati Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. And Charlie, look, the Cincinnati Bengals fall yet again. It's their fourth straight loss. This time they fall to the upstart New England Patriots, who now have come into Paycor Stadium each of the last 2 years to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. What's your first impression coming off this loss on Sunday?
Ultimately, as unbelievable as Joe Flacco's been over the course of his Bengals tenure, and as much as he's done for the organization, for the offense, for the coaches, for the team, for the guys around him, he had a pick six. He took a sack that lost the Bengals 3 points. There were some third down plays that he just missed. Not his cleanest game. And that created a style of game where the rest of the team had to pick him up. And while the defense played better, ultimately there were still some mistakes. The offense, missing Jamar, missing T for that final drive, just didn't quite have enough juice at the end of the day.
Yeah, look, I think we need to really understand that Joe Burrow was playing with an injured shoulder. I mean, if you've ever had a AC joint injury, trust me when I tell you, just trying to put deodorant on under that arm, Charlie, is maybe that's not the best visual, but I think it gives you a clear, distinct understanding that just raising that elbow is very painful. I don't know how he was able to throw the ball. There was one moment in the game where he hit his hand on one of the pass rushers that were coming in to bat down the ball, and that had to impact his ability to throw the ball. And you take the fact that Jamar Chase, who was suspended for this game, was unable to play. Andre Yosivas was lost in the middle of the game due to injury. T. Higgins was lost in this game. You take the top three receivers out of the game, the opposing defense is salivating. Even Mitchell Tinsley did his best to even try to help salvage whatever he could by getting a touchdown, 18-yard touchdown pass from Joe Flacco. It was a thing of beauty, but simply not enough to compete against a Patriots team that's pretty good. They're a surging team, but I don't know that the Cincinnati Bengals, for me anyway, what comes away is this. They have bigger problems than just saying, oh, when we get Joe Burrow back, we're going to be okay. I would caution everyone from believing that because there are other areas that need to be paid attention to. Your thoughts?
The defense still showed progress, and that's kind of what's sad about this performance is, they tackled better. They played the run very well. Overall, they just played faster. They played with more energy, more enthusiasm. But still, they were picked apart by the Patriots tight ends. The middle of the field was still there to exploit. There weren't enough splash plays from the defensive line. Even though there were real positives, this still didn't look like a good defense. So that's just kind of the place they're stuck in right now.
Drake May, second-year quarterback, had a career high 294 yards passing. There was a play where they left Hunter Henry wide open for a 28-yard touchdown down the left side. He's wide open. I mean, we got not only busted coverages, still the tackling not nearly as crisp, not nearly enough pressure put on a very young quarterback, being able to distort the looks. I think Al Golden is doing his best to help this defense improve. What I mean by that is what? Giving more simple looks. I thought they had their best day of pressuring the quarterback than they've had in quite some time. They were getting after the quarterback. They were getting hits on him, forced a pick six, a high throw from Drake May. Geno Stone had the pick six interception return for a touchdown. That was a thing of beauty. Allowed the Bengals to be competitive in this game. So there were some areas of improvement, but yet and still it's a young quarterback, right, that still came in and looked like he was a veteran as the Patriots won their 9th straight game. They have now won 10 of their 11 games, and so this game was no different. Yeah, they didn't run the ball on the Bengals defense, but the passing plays and the big plays downfield were still there to be had.
It all started with the tight ends. There were a couple just wow moments from Drake May. And then just as a whole New England, they just played, they've aside from the pick six, they played a very clean game. They're a very clean team. They were operating very well on the margins, even though they had a bunch of injuries. Guys stepped up, and it was a very collective effort where you saw a bunch of details that made for a team that has the 1 seed in the AFC. And aside from a few throws from May, there wasn't a whole lot that overwhelmed you about this team. You weren't living in fear or in panic about specific matchups or specific superstar players, but they operated. They had a lot of confidence in what they wanted to do and who they were. And just that team identity did so much for them. It's done so much for them all season. That's been the biggest reason for their turnaround.
I'm going to point out something that is so noticeably different since Joe Flacco's become the starting quarterback over the 6 games. Now, the team is 1-5, but yet the Bengals were able to score 30 or more points in 3 of the 6 starts that Joe Flacco has had. So the point production has been up. More importantly, the run game has improved. Once again, Chase Brown has over 100 yards receiving. He has 100 yards from scrimmage for the 5th straight game. Think about that. Of the 6 games that Joe Flacco has played, the run game's been there. It certainly has been, it's been a huge plus for Chase Brown. What is it about the way Joe Flacco plays has helped the run game for the Cincinnati Bengals? Or is this just a matter of over the course of the season, the offensive line's gotten better, they got a better feel for it? How do you sort of earmark this as something that's happened exclusively with Joe Flacco as the Bengals quarterback?
So week 1, the Bengals played the best rushing defense maybe in the league, or definitely was playing like it early in the year in Cleveland. Week 2, the Bengals scored, 35 points or something like that. So even though Chase Brown didn't put on a show, the offense did what it needed to do. And then weeks 3 through, I believe, 5 was Jake Browning. And the offense was operating at historically low levels with Jake Browning. Teams were selling out to stop the run. It was really hard on the offensive line. The offensive line also was just playing very, very poorly. But really, since Flacco came here, I think more than anything, it's forced teams to respect the passing game more. That's opened up some opportunities. The offensive line has really gained more confidence. For most of this year, it's been 2 rookies at guard. They've figured things out, especially in the run game, especially with Jalen Rivers in the run game because he's still struggling in the passing game. Once you saw those rookies playing with more confidence, then Chase had more confidence, Chase Brown, and then he just got to be himself. He's looked exactly like the guy that we saw throughout the second half of last season. This is a top 10 back in the league. He's consistently looking like a Pro Bowler now for the better part of 2 months. He makes guys miss. He shows great patience. He has value in the passing game. There's so much to like about Chase Brown, who's firmly established himself as one of the core players on the Bengals. 100
yards from scrimmage for Chase Brown for the 5th straight game. This guy's capable of, if he's got space, he's going to make you miss in a phone booth. He is highly elusive. 5.6 yards per carry average, going over 100 yards on just 19 carries on the game. So that speaks to his highly efficient, elusive rating, where the first unblocked defender can't get this guy on the ground. So whether it's in the run game, where earlier in the season he was getting hit in the backfield almost every time he had the ball. Now he has more room to operate, and he's hitting home runs for this offense. And he's just a player that's going to continue to get better. I think he's secretly and quietly one of the best things to happen to the Cincinnati Bengals football team as a whole. There hasn't been a lot, Charlie, to point at. Chase Brown has been something that has been very positive to point out for this football team. And I think you were able to nail some of the reasons for why he has been successful. Look, Joe Burrow is going to come back. It's clear. He practiced a lot last week. I want you to walk me through what last week was like. They decided not to play him in this game on Sunday. They were going to play, 2 games over the course of 5 days. So didn't want to see Joe Burrow immediately return to that kind of workload. But it looks like to me that he's going to be back in the starting lineup 4 days after losing to the Patriots for the Thanksgiving night game on the road against the Baltimore Ravens. What are you hearing?
Flacco certainly was talking post-game like this was his last start with the Bengals last week against the Patriots. Just a reflective tone, talking about what it's been like being the Bengals starting quarterback. Burrow had, Flacco's been missing practices on Wednesdays. He manages his shoulder. So Burrow took the full share of the reps on Wednesday. My understanding was they both got opportunities on Thursday as Burrow worked more and more and more in, but Flacco also got the work he needed to be ready to face the Patriots. And then Friday, I believe Burrow was limited, but there were no setbacks. Burrow's been trending exactly how the Bengals wanted to. And it all seemingly would be leading towards Burrow coming off IR this week.
There are so many people who question, are the Bengals bringing Joe Burrow back too soon? The other question is Joe Burrow himself coming back too soon? And there's this other question that if your playoff hopes are that nil, considering they just lost their 4th consecutive game this season, they're now 3-8 playoff. They're going to need help now to get into the postseason. Maybe if they win out, they get in, but probably going to need some help. As to, is this all necessary? I'm going to give my opinion, but I want to hear from you first. Your thoughts.
Burrow's a football player, man, and he's played 2 games since January. And if you sit him for the rest of the year, he'd be going basically last January to next September without having played. He worked so hard to get back as ahead of schedule as he is. I think there's value in giving him that bit of reward. And then also you need to identify, who belongs here. Obviously not talking about Burrow, but some of these offensive linemen, some of these guys on defense, and to get the best evaluation of what you have, you need to be able to have your best team possibly out there. What can you really say about Jalen Rivers and his ability to block for Joe Burrow if you've never seen him block for Joe Burrow? So it provides some strong evaluation opportunities. It rewards Burrow. It's good for the culture. I have no problem at all with the Bengals bringing Burrow back.
With 6 games to go, that's a lot of work. That's a month and a half of games to get under his belt and to begin to get back into form. You and I both know the more that Joe Burrow plays, the better he gets. I think that's what we all know that about him. The more looks, the more reps, the more opportunities he gets, he's going to rise to a certain level. He's a competitor. This is not a guy who plays it safe. This is not a guy that is comfortable with salary and all the things that comes with being a star in the National Football League. He is about the grind, man. He's about the work. He really plays for what we call the love of the game. That is who you have at quarterback. And to expect him to be anything else, Charlie, is not really truly understanding who and what he is. So, look, anything can happen in these next 6 games. Any player can get hurt. That's what we all know what the inherent risks are. But at the end of the day, playing in these games matters to him. So to me, it matters because I think he wants to continue to refine his game with 6 opportunities left in the season and let the chips fall where they may. Let's see where it takes us.
And you can't live your life being scared of guys getting hurt.
Right.
This is football. Right. At some point, you just got to line up and play.
Right.
Burrow deserves that. The team deserves that. You can't be operating out of fear or else, you'll never cross the street in the morning. And that's kind of a part 2 of the confidence, the identity, and the culture that Zach Taylor's trying to reestablish with the Bengals. And they really do see Burrow coming back as a sign of that. And ideally, in their mind, what they feel like they need to really solidify that is some wins.
That's right. He's inspirational, too. You got to understand the quarterback position, it inspires the other 52 guys. Who you have at wide receiver, that matters. I mean, look, Jamar Chase is incredible. But I didn't get the sense that because he was suspended from this game against the Patriots that all the other 52 guys were throwing their hands up saying, oh, woe is us, right? But the quarterback position, who's playing that position, it matters. I think we saw the difference in the energy when Burrow was playing as opposed to when Jake Browning was playing. And then we saw the energy change with the team when Joe Flacco was changing. So that position matters, Charlie. The guy who's under center, the guy who's breaking the huddle, the guy who is pulling the trigger, right? At that position, it matters. And so what do you think it means to the other 52 guys these last 6 games, despite the fact that they're 3-8, that Joe Burrow is going to be under center when they go to Baltimore to play the Ravens on Thanksgiving night?
It just makes you more excited to show up to work. And there's power in that. There's value in that. I think that's something we all can relate to, and you're excited to show up to work. You get a better version of yourself. You're more energetic, you're more passionate, you're more enthusiastic, you're more locked in. And Burrow truly has that presence. Heck, Flacco coming in and the upgrade he represented over Jake Browning represented that presence for the Bengals. And it's something that creates and holds a lot of power. It's why these guys are so highly paid. You've built this whole thing around Burrow too. So let's give yourself the best chance to make sure that what you've built is on the right trajectory.
What do you expect to see from Joe? I do Bleav that the more you play, the better you get. And that means if you're not playing, there could be some rust. The clock, the mental clock that quarterbacks need to have of when to get the ball out and how long you can hold on to the ball. I do think those things are going to need to be refined, reading the movement of the defense. But when you're on the sideline watching a little bit, and I'm not saying that Joe Burrow was learning from Joe Flacco. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think there's some nuance of the way the team is operating, the way the players operate around the quarterback, that he gets to see this bigger picture of things, right? Having stepped back for a little bit, that if there's one thing that maybe he can do better more immediately, that Joe Flacco did really well, was getting the ball out quickly, right? Because behind this offensive line, let's face it, you don't have 3 seconds. You may not even have the requisite 2.5 seconds, right? And that was the one thing I thought Flacco did really well that Jake Browning did not do well. And that is diagnose, read and react at a much faster rate and get the ball to Higgins, get the ball to Chase, get the ball to Yoshivas. And having Mike Gesicki back seemed to have helped as well.
Now, Flacco did a terrific job getting rid of the ball quickly, and Burrow will do that, but Burrow will also hold on to the ball. Burrow's also going to create. Burrow's able to be all the styles of quarterback, and there's going to be a time and place for them to lean more into the stuff that Flacco did well. Heck, maybe even lean more into some of the play action that they didn't do a ton of with Flacco, but they did some of. But ultimately, you're still going to build around Burrow's strengths, and you're not going to try to reinvent the entire offense, reinvent the entire playbook, ask Burrow to become an entirely different type of quarterback just because, Flacco did X, Y, and Z at a high level.
Okay. Looking ahead, Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Baltimore Ravens Thanksgiving night. Just as your turkey has begun to digest thoroughly, you're coming out of that nap. What do you expect? Because this Baltimore Ravens team have now won 5 in a row after getting off to a 1-5 start. They're in first place, Charlie, in the AFC North Division. The Pittsburgh Steelers have fallen. They have begun to take on water. But this Ravens team is a surging team. They've made the improvements defensively and seems like they're hitting their stride just in time for the Bengals' arrival at M&T Bank Stadium on Thursday night.
Yeah, what this should be, is a game of two teams whose quarterbacks missed a bit of time, but are now getting themselves back in the picture, playing for a real, pecking order in the AFC North. But it's obviously not that for the Bengals, though the Ravens have firmly established that ideal trajectory. Their defense has really stepped up. Kyle Hamilton's versatility has been a key to all that. They've found some solutions on defense when their defense looked like a unit that was kind of slipping and snowballing away. And then while Lamar's not firing on all cylinders yet, they've established momentum. They've established more of a rhythm. And it's a very tall task too, just having been, every year it feels like on these road primetime environments in Baltimore. That's one of the best in the league. And that's going to create its own challenges that the Bengals are very, very well familiar with. Challenges they'll have to do a better job overcoming than they have in some recent years.
It seems like every time these two teams meet, when Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are playing, it's a high-scoring affair. I mean, it's a shootout. Both teams are scoring 30 or more points, and that doesn't even seem to be enough when these two teams meet. I do think the nuance of having a Derrick Henry in the backfield with Lamar Jackson poses a different kind of threat, particularly for Bengals defense that hasn't been tackling well. So what kind of game do you expect? Do you expect a high-scoring game, even with the recent return of Joe Burrow? Is this offense going to be clicking to be able to play at that pace and and keep up with a Baltimore Ravens team that seems to be hitting its stride?
Considering Lamar doesn't quite look 100% yet, and I know the Bengals have done a solid job against the run over the last 2 weeks, but I expect the Ravens to kind of follow the same playbook we've seen teams take against the Bengals defense. Lean into the run game, lean into your tight ends, lean into some safer options, as opposed to trying to be a high-flying, acrobatic, outside the numbers, vertical passing game offense. So that also maybe helps, Joe Burrow not have to go all the way pedal to the metal as he tries to shake off some rust. I expect the Ravens to try to dictate kind of a more lower possession, grindy, run-oriented game. But, if Jamar can break off a screen into a touchdown like he always seems to against Baltimore too, that's a way to kind of turn that style of game into the Bengals' favor. That's why the chess match is always so fun between these guys.
Wouldn't it be nice if Joe Burrow could return maybe with one more notch in the win column? I mean, think about this. The Pittsburgh Steelers have now lost 4 of their last 6 games. The Ravens began the season losing 5 of their first 6 games. I mean, both these teams are kind of just sitting there wallowing at a level of mediocrity that if only the Bengals could have maybe grabbed one more win along the way, perhaps, that you feel like it would be enough of an impetus for Joe Burrow to walk in that door and save the day. And I know he's still going to try, but you just get the sense that the odds are kind of stacked against him sitting here with a 3-8 record with 6 games to go.
And that's it's just what makes it such a tough year for the Bengals.
Yeah.
And even these losses, yesterday felt like progress for the Bengals, but it's still a team that had Super Bowl aspirations. It's still a team that's not going to pat itself on the back for playing the Patriots tough. It's a reminder of how quickly things have changed, how quickly they've had to shift into what feels like rebuilding mode, but they're not there yet. Burrow doesn't view themselves as there yet. But that's how this has felt, and that's what Burrow's being dropped back into, and that's kind of the story of the season.
Yeah, it is the story of the season, but there's a lot of intrigue for many who are paying attention to the return of Joe Burrow, who is set to start Thursday night, Thanksgiving evening on the road against the Baltimore Ravens. Can he come back in time to salvage a season that seemingly had been lost? And as much as Joe Flacco tried to carry this football team, the Bengals were 1-5 during the 6 games when he started. However, this team, you got to pay attention now. This is not just about who's the quarterback. They have lost 3 of their last 6 games, even though they've scored 30 or more points. In those 6 games, they've lost 2 of those 3 when they've scored 30 or more points. Over the last 2 seasons, they've scored 30-plus points and lost 6. They've lost 6 times since the start of last season when scoring that many points. So only reason why I bring that up, Charlie, because this is not just about production at the quarterback position. Even when Joe Burrow has been out, they've had good production at the quarterback position in 2023 with Jake Browning. This year, they had good production at the quarterback position with Joe Burrow out and Joe Flacco in, but yet still could not win. So I think we need to pay attention to that. I'm not going to let it rest throughout this offseason, but let's see if Joe Burrow can do his part anyway to help this team get into the postseason. I know we got to get going. I want to thank you for joining us once again, Charlie. We want to thank everyone for stopping by this Bleav in Bengals edition of this podcast presented by FanDuel. We want to thank you for joining us, everyone. Don't forget to join us next time.